have a fascination with the Mafia? A quick look at the weekend movie listings provides a clue. Everyone loves a wise guy, or so it seems. And the wise guy, that means gangster to anyone who isn't one, is again a big hit at the box office this fall. The winner so far seems to be Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas, based on Nicholas Pileggi's book, Wise Guys, about New York gangster Henry Hill, who joins the mob as a boy and learns the rules early on.
You took your first pinch like a man, and you learned the two greatest things in life.
Well, look at me.
Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
Then tonight marks the national debut of the movie Miller's Crossing, set in the 1930s, about a mob boss played by Albert Finney, the man the wise guys go to get things done.
And that's how we know that it's Bernie Birnbaum, the schmata kid. Because ethically, he's kind of shaky.
So you want to kill him? For starters.
And finally, there's the movie State of Grace, about the mafioso's cousins, the Westies, an Irish gang that controlled the area of New York's West Side known as Hell's Kitchen.
Pull up a chair, kid.
Quick work. There are several more of these in the works this fall. And, of course, Godfather Part 3 is going to come out on Christmas Day.
Now, just to take a look at the numbers here. Goodfellas, which was not that hideous shooting at the end, one of the earlier films, #1 in box office sales during its very first week. For a Scorsese film, that's knockout. The second week it slipped to #2, but as of Monday, October 1st, Goodfellas has had gross earnings of about $15 million in 2.5 weeks. It's playing on 1,300 screens. This is very, very good music to financial ears, anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Joining us now to talk about our fascination with the Mafia is film critic Gene Siskel, and in London, author Nicholas Pileggi, who co-wrote the screenplay for Goodfellas with director Martin Scorsese. And welcome to both of you. Nick, what is so irresistible about mob films?
I think there's a form of controlled violence and a form of controlled battling that goes on, and I think there's an appeal to that rather than the kind of random violence you often see in films today.
What do you mean by controlled violence?
Well, when the mobs control their little territories, you find that the murders that take place are usually about business. That's usually a line you're going to see in most of the films. I think the thing that has the general public absolutely terrified today is not that kind of controlled mob violence, but the kind of random violence we see in drive-bys in California and the kinds of random murders you see on the streets of New York.
I had a feeling that you were going to be saying something like this, and I chose the most famous, maybe the most perfect example in movies to illustrate that point, which, by the way, I have to confess to the persons who made the movie, we did edit. Let's take a look at this.
Remember in Godfather 1, Michael Corleone is at a christening while his staff is out murdering people. But notice they only murder other mafiosi. Here are 2 mobsters and an elevator man. Notice they shoot only 1, 2, that's the mobsters, not the elevator man. Next, here's a mobster and a masseur. The mobster has to die, of course, but not the masseur. The next mobster is carefully trapped alone in a revolving door. Very neat killing there. The next one, though, I think is definitely sloppy planning. This mobster is in bed with what we have to presume is an innocent bystander, and yet she dies. Finally, you've got 1, 2, 3 mobsters, this is the third, who die on the courthouse steps. Everybody else is hiding or quite safe. So let's recap now. Of 9 murders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are purely business. Only 1 is an error, which isn't really very bad.
And that's pretty much what he's talking about,
All
right?
in one day's work.
Right. Although I do get the impression lately that things have changed in these movies. That we're not seeing these classic emperor types who hierarchically control everything and restrict the violence. But
well, I think that the exciting part of the Scorsese film, Goodfellas, based on Mr. Pileggi's book, is that these guys are not heroic. They don't have much of a code, as it turns out. That with the arrival, certainly, of drug trade and that big money, they're ratting on each other left and right. And I think what's exciting about this film, in addition to the filmmaking, is that it takes a real hard moral stance against these guys. They come off as creeps, scum, I think after you see a picture like Goodfellas and you are in a restaurant and somebody whispers, you know who that is? You know, I don't care. I don't want to be in the same place with them. They're awful. And I think, and I don't know if that was intended by Mr. Pileggi, but that's what this one film critic got out of the film. I'd be interested, Nick, if that's what you were trying to get.
Well, what we were trying to do with this film was really, for the first time, was do almost a documentary about what that life is like. Most of the films, in the clip you just showed, is a wonderful film, and it's a saga, and it's fiction. It's based on a novel. The Scorsese film and my film, this was based on a real story. Henry Hill actually existed, and the men who act the parts of the people in Goodfellas actually existed. That's what happened, and we're trying to give people a look at what that world was really like.
The interesting thing, too, is that this less romantic view is just as successful, really, just as appealing.
Well, you know, if you're going to match it up against The Godfather, not quite. But still, for this kind of hard look, unsavory look at the mob, not romantic at all, I am surprised. I'm very surprised.
Nick, I seem to recall reading somewhere that Henry Hill, wherever he is in the USA, misses mob life. Is that right?
Yes, it turns out that that is right. I mean, I worked, it took about 4 years for me to get that book from Henry, usually meeting him in courthouses, meeting him under the protection of the Federal Witness Program, which would be the United States Marshals. And the one thing that struck me about him was, and about a lot of these guys, by the way, is that there was no remorse. He had no remorse. He had ratted out, as the language is, all of the people who had ever helped him, everyone who had ever, his mentor, his surrogate father, he ratted them all out, and his only feeling at the end of that entire experience was that he regretted having to leave the life. He was now going to have to lead an honest life,
well, you know,
and he found that awful.
Edie told me a story that when she went to the movie, this makes me just a little nervous, I should say. She goes to the movie, and in the movie, one of the characters has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend is abused by another fellow. And this character goes over to the abusive fellow and hits him in the nose with the butt of a revolver over and over and over again. And the audience?
And the audience cheered, quite literally.
Cheered. Now, I'm wondering,
Yes.
what, you know, if it takes some kind of moral courage to show us somebody like this, what does it say when everyone in the audience is going, that's what I
A
want.
lot of frustrated people all the time. They go to movies to work it off like that. They like when Schwarzenegger puts away in Total Recall the woman who is his wife and says, I consider this a divorce. Big cheers, and that a lot of people very frustrated. We know that. The divorce courts are full of frustrated people, so maybe there's a little bit of fantasy there.
Well, we're going to see a lot more of that all through the fall. Thanks so much to both of you, Gene Siskel and Nicholas Pileggi. America Tonight, Friday. We'll be back in a moment.